Hi, I'm Steve McCord, Cattaraugus County Director of Veteran Services, and this is Our Veterans, Their Stories, preserving our heroes' stories, one story at a time.
My name's Harold Baker, but I've always went by Nick Baker for all my life, I guess. My great-grandfather was Nicholas Baker, and now my grandson's name is Nicholas. But I finished high school in 1965, and we had current events every Friday, I think. Some teacher or something would put the bulletin on the bulletin board, put the events, and it was Vietnam, Vietnam, Vietnam. So we weren't shy to it, and we had current events in world history or whatever it was, and so we knew what was coming. You know, my buddy of mine, I won't mention his name, he's passed, but, well, I'm going to say passed, I was going to leave that towards the end, but I said, Al, we might not go too long if we get drafted and get in Nam. We might only last a month or so, from what I hear. I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll join the Navy. We got to go 4 years instead of 2. We have to go twice as long, but we're going to save ourselves maybe from getting killed. Yeah, that's a good idea. So after we got out of high school, just a month or so after that, and we enlisted in the Navy. I graduated in 65. It was March of 66 when him and I went in. Went up to Great Lakes, the boot camp, and we got out. I went on an aircraft carrier, and Al went to hospital corpsman school. So we didn't see much of each other after that for a long time. And I was on the Kity Hawk, and read out in Southeast Asia. All my tours, I spent 2 years and 3 months going from Mekong Delta to Gulf of Tonkin, South China Seas, back and forth. We worked 12 hours on and 12 off, putting bombs on the F-4 Phantoms, the A-6s. Can't remember all of them, but it kept us busy. I was actually a pipe fitter, or that's in Dave's terminology, a ship fitter. That was combined between taking care of all the pipes and the drinking fountains and all the water, so you didn't waste water because you couldn't get that much, and damage control. So, but we were trained, and I went to firefighting school in San Diego. That was, I don't know if that was, I can't remember when that was. I think that was just before I went on the Kity Hawk. But one thing on the Kity Hawk I forgot to mention, I didn't have it wrote down there, I didn't know how much time you were going to allot me, but this first class, never forget him, skinnier than a rail, Bruce. Anyway, he was a first class in the pipe shop. He looked at me. He knew I was a good worker. He said, "Nick, come with me." Okay. So we went down in the ship as far as we could go. Got down in the boiler room, took off a cover off the plate down in there. It's called a coffer dam. We went down in there, took a trouble light, and went all the way back and around and around. And he says, "This pipe has got to be cut off. It's a 2-inch pipe." He said they had a plug in the outside. The diver, this was in Subic Bay, the divers went in and put a plug in the outside. So don't worry, okay. But he said don't worry, but as soon as I started cutting, he took off. Well, I was cutting, I had blood running off my goddamn knuckles, and I got it cut, and I mean, when I cut into it, I was waiting. If water comes out of that, I'm getting. I'd follow the light, trouble light out through. So I got it cut. No, he wasn't there. I don't know what he was going to do when I got it cut. Maybe he wanted me to cut it off. It was probably about that much space in there. Maybe he wanted to cut off up there too. I don't have no idea what the hell he was going to do with it. Anyways, I started to go out and I broke the light. I pulled it and the light broke on the trouble light. And all right, I'm in the darkness and I got to go the half length of a football field in and out and then trying to find. I didn't have claustrophobia back then. If I did, I'd have probably pulled all of my hair out. But finally, I got up and I seen the light where that cover was off in the bilges down under the boilers there. I knew I had it made. A couple weeks later, he says, "Nick," okay, he said, "get some welding rods in my helmet." Okay. So I got him a little can of welding rods. He told me what kind he wanted, 70-18, I guess. I don't even know if they made them back then. Might have been 70-11 or something. Anyways, get me the welding rod and come with me. We did. Went up on the not the flight deck, but Jesus, I can't remember what the hell they called it. It was the full deck underneath the flight deck where they kept all the planes. Anyways, there was a ship on the side of us. They'd shoot over a cord or a string or whatnot. Then it turned into a cord, then it turned into a cable. They'd put it under a winch. And then they'd hook their bombs on over there or replenish it and pull them over. So they got that all done. The cable was still there. And the little ship down there looked like a canoe compared to the Kity Hawk. Bruce says, "You come over, I'll take my helmet, you bring my welding rod." What? He had this little square chair, and he snapped that on the cable with a pulley on it and latched it down. He got on that, the way he went. And there was a cable on both sides of the chair. In case something happened, they could pull you that way, and then they could pull you back if you didn't get where you was going, I guess. Anyway, so another buddy of mine says, "Guess you're going to go over and feed them the rods, Nick." I said, "I guess." I got in that boats and made chair, and I put them can of rods between my legs. And the guy said, "You ready?" Yep. Of course, 18, 19, you didn't have a hell of a lot of fear then. Down I went. And that old salt water was licking me in the face. And I looked up and I seen that other ship was going, oh, Christ, it must have been from the water just to where I left, must have been 30 foot. So I got over there and he welded up. He was a certified welder, so he welded up the pipes and stuff. Then we come back. But we'd go in port. They'd take us into the Subic Bay, Philippines. We'd go in there about every 3 or 4 months. We'd go in for 10 or 15 days and unwind. And boy, did we unwind too. But and we go back to the Kity Hawk. One time it was the second time, I think. Let's see, it was 1967 in December. I just got me and my buddy from Peoria, Illinois. We come back to the ship, and we drank a little bit, but not much. We was monkeying around, and we just got in the nest, and the general quarters alarm went off. So there we go. So we went up, and there wasn't many people around. We had our quarters where we usually go. I was in like a fog foam station. They got 5-gallon pails of this special foam they'd put on fires to put it out real quick. But there wasn't anybody on the ship. Everybody was on leave or off in Subic Bay. So we went right where the fire was. And of course we didn't have our OBAs, so we went in the chow hall, and they had a couple OBAs in the glass. It was a cupboard, but it had glass windows in it, and it was locked. So we took a chair, smashed the glass, we got our OBAs on, made sure our canisters were activated, and down we went. It was across the flight deck, down on the catwalk, and down in under where they keep airplane wheels and tires. And all the wheels were magnesium, which we didn't know at that time. There's no way you're going to put magnesium fire out with water. But we got down there. I was number 2 man on number 1 hose. And we got down, I'll say at the ladder, the steps, They were like our steps, but we always called it a ladder, and they were aluminum. We got down there, and when you could feel that heat, we had our mask on, and all of a sudden that hose just went limp. And I went flying right back up, probably 5-6 foot back up. And I didn't realize it. They took me over to Subic Bay. I had burns all over the back of my head and my ears. Thank God for that mask. We kept my face and my hair. Wished I had that hair today. But I went over got patched up, and I come back and grabbed an OBA, and my other buddy from Peoria, Illinois, Rachel, he says, "You can't go in there, you'll get infection in them." Well, they had enough guys there anyways, and I said, "Well, where's Joe?" And Rachel said, he didn't make it. Evidently, the rung melted off on just in front of me, and he went off into it. He was incinerated. He was from Columbus, Ohio. Joe Mastrulo. You never forget. And that's part of my theme here. There's no end to it, is the way I put it, because you're never gonna forget things like that. And that was only one incident that I come real close at, and I don't know really how far I can stand to go as far as mention other things like that, but
Did they ever say what started that fire down there with the magnesium?
no, they couldn't. I never heard anything.
That's an odd place for a fire.
Especially
in
yeah.
yeah.
And I asked my buddy Dave Rachel from Peoria, Illinois. He's passed just last year, but he come out and visited one time. He was on his way to Gettysburg. Him and his wife stopped, and I asked him whatever started that, and he had no idea. He said, but he says everybody thinks it was a hush hush, somebody got the blame for it and got wrote up or jailed or whatever. But I mean, you'd have to have an accelerant to get that going.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just throw a piece of paper on a rubber tire and expect it to. But I don't know. I often thought of that. I know it was god darn hot when we lost water pressure and that heat come back. Holy Christ.
What was life like on a carrier?
On a carrier?
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. I mean, we had 12. We worked our ass off when we had to. And then after I made second class, I had to stand watch down in Damage Control Central. And before that, you had to take on soundings. They called soundings. You took a big tape measure on a reel with a plumb bob on it, and you'd go take the cap off and you put that down in there and see how much water in it. That's to balance the ship. Then you wrote down how much water was in it, and it must have been. It took 4 hours to do all that, and that was only one section of the ship. There was forward, midsection, and aft, and it wasn't bad. I mean, you was on your own. You couldn't beat the food. I think the food was excellent. That's another thing about food in boot camp. If you didn't eat all your food, you had to do extra duty in someplace. I don't know where they did it. Anyway, so of course I weighed 98 pounds, I think, when I went in boot camp. We had them metal trays at boot camp to eat off from. Man, I'd scarf mine down. I looked and it was gone. Someone took theirs and put theirs over there. And they didn't want to get extra duty, but they didn't like the food. Man, I went to 140 pounds in 8 weeks.
Wow.
I was like a Betty Rooter when I come home on leave.
Did the aircraft carrier have the hamburger bar, the 24-hour hamburger bar?
I don't think so, not back then. They did have mid-rats, I think. They called midnight rations.
Yes.
You could go down to the cafeteria or the chow hall and get something. And, if I had to stand to watch from 4 to midnight. I can't remember. I might have went down there at midnight and got a sandwich but at any rate, I put in a request to go do shore duty in Vietnam. I was almost 19, I guess. Maybe I was 19 then. Well, it didn't take long. I don't think the ink even dried on the paper. And the guy said, "Okay, get your duffel bag ready." So then he come back later and he says, "We're going in port. You might as well wait until we do your 15 days." And I said, "That's fine." Well, then I went down and Rachel says, "Why don't you just put in a request to go home? They'll fly you back to the States." And because I hadn't seen my parents in 2 years, I thought that'd be a good idea. Go see the parents, and might not make it back. So I went home, and I had a lot of PTSD just from this fire and a couple other incidents, and I started self-medicating on alcohol. Well, I got on the back of a motorcycle with my brother, and we wrecked. I was raising a little hell on the back of the bike. It was just much my fault as it was his. And we wrecked, and I broke my left leg. We hit one of the old wooden type guardrails with cables on it, and hit that and flew down between the railroad tracks and the road. I mean, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. We laid there, and I looked, and my boot laid right here, and I, what the hell, my boot? And that was my leg. So I climbed up, or pulled myself up over the bank and got by the edge of the road, and a car come down through, and he was on his way to work, and he spotted us, and I don't know where my brother was. I couldn't find him. I hollered for him, and the guy took me to the hospital. And the doctor says, "There's nothing we can do here," because it was kind of shattered right in the shin bone and stuff. They got a 7-inch plate in there now and some screws. But they sent me to Philadelphia Naval Hospital. So I was down there. Actually, I was there 2 years, or a year and 18 months altogether. From July of '68 until December of '69. About 18 months. And I was in there, and everybody had to do duty. I worked in the duplicating room. They cut they had a piece of plywood you sit on, then it went out, and I put my leg up on the plywood, and I would do the duplicating machines and everything. Well, then the guy come down one day, and he says, "Nick, we gotta take you down there," and he gave me a clipboard with a bunch of names on it. Go down where the airvocs come in, the air evacuation medical group and stuff they'd fly. It was only 20 minutes from the Philadelphia airport. I'm not sure which one it was. But they'd fly in there with these wounded people and bring them to the hospital. Well, I had to write down and make sure I got the names right and everybody was accounted for. And it was all 17, 18 years old. Arm off, leg off, 2 legs, anything you could imagine. Above the knee, below the knee, double AK, double BK. It was terrible, to put it mildly. But there's things like that, it still goes through your head time and time again. Like I say, I think the hospital I picked up more stress there than I did on the ship. But at any rate, I did that for a while. And they took the long leg cast off and put a short leg cast on. And they'd bring a bus in and they'd take us to these vets clubs and Legion clubs around Philadelphia. You could go in there and eat and drink anything you wanted. So one incident there, a couple incidents, but the one incident, we were coming back from the party and I had that short leg cast on and I went back and I sat down. They'd take the wheelchairs and they'd fold them up and put them along the aisle. And the kid come in, and he was in a wheelchair and he got the thing and he swung around. He had no legs and he sat there and one eye was out. And his buddy was with him, handed him a paper plate with a piece of cake on it. And then he sat there, minding his own business, and I think the bus just started, and there was this big guy. I didn't notice him at first, but he come through and he sat behind me. They called him Dick the Bruiser back then. He reached around me and he took that piece of cake off that kid's plate and smashed it all over his head. And I stood up and I said, "What the hell did you do that for?" First thing you know, lights were out. He put my lights out. Not for long, because I was tougher than goddamn nails back then, I'll tell you. But I got up, got a hold of the railings, got on the wheelchairs, went back, and I took that long leg cast and I cracked him side the head with that goddamn cast and splintered the window. But I ain't bragging and I'm not complaining, I'm just saying it was survival. Well, then everything turned loose. Well, when I started back, the guy said, some guys in the back said, "Come on, Bake, come on back here." So that's when I got the idea of getting up on the thing and then giving him a little return. And anyways, then when I did that, everything turned loose. I fell down in underneath, and my back of my pants was ripped out, and I lost my billfold. But a couple days later, they took us all down in the gymnasium. There was this big guy. He was a Masters of Arms. And he had me there, and he had Dick the Bruiser. And I looked up at Dick the Bruiser like that. And my eyeball was swelled shut, and the Master of Arms said, "Look what you did to that little guy." You know, Dick the Bruiser, he's shaking, and he started crying and shaking. And, well, enough of that.
Why did he do it?
Pardon me?
Why did he smash the cake on it?
Because I don't know why he took the cake. But I know
This was in a Pets Club, right?
No, this was in the bus. It was in the bus. And the kid come in, he got in the seat, and his buddy handed him the cake, and he sat there. And Dick the Bruiser reached over and did that. I don't know why. That's just the way he was. He's, I don't know, they call it the T-ramp, where they put people that were unstable. I don't know, he might have been on the T-ramp. I think he was. He was out there, but they let him go on his own reconnaissance for a while. Then that's when that happened. I think he was in the nut ward there. But that was one of the deals. Then I come home on leave. Well, I guess that's when I had the long leg cast on. I come home, took a Greyhound bus and went home. And my brother and I, it was Christmas time, my brother and I was coming home. I had a 65 Chevy Impala, and it was down there, like I had my cast like this, driving along, and we were pretty well loaded. We had to make a turn to go across the bridge to go up to my folks' house. Well, somehow I run into the end of the bridge, and I went through the windshield, almost through the windshield. My cast caught on the steering wheel, kept me from going to the windshield. Probably a good thing I did, because the river was raging with ice floating in it. If I'd went down over that bank, I'd have been gone. But I mean, just there were a few things that you go through. I don't know really if Vietnam had a lot to do with it. Maybe it was because of my young age, and I don't know. My psychiatrist says it was Vietnam and a lot of childhood stress or whatever. But I see her twice a week, or twice a month. It helps some, but... Okay, now we're back in Philadelphia again, and I got news that my buddy Al, that I told him we'd be safe, I got news he got killed in Vietnam. So that was the end of that. That kind of shattered me. It set me off the deep end again with alcohol. But kind of set me off on that too. Just jump ahead a little bit, 4 or 5 years later, when I was discharged and had a job. And of course, I was in the hospital. I couldn't go to his funeral at the time. And I had a couple surgeries on that. Maybe that was the reason. But I didn't go to his funeral. But 3 or 4 years later after that, I run into his wife and started to tell her how sorry I was about Al. and she clawed into me. It's all my goddamn fault. Oh my God. And that's where you get survivor's guilt, I guess. But I'm just kind of getting to the point where they show you that veterans don't always have to be in a war zone or a complete war zone to pick up stress and all of the horse shit that goes with it. But them guys that come in them aerovacs, they were aerovacs, they come in, they were 17, 18 years old. And after I got ambulatory so I could walk a little bit, the hospital was getting full. They had this ramp went out off the hospital, and there was beds all the way down it. So if you could ambulatory and you didn't need a nurse, you could go out there. And so we did. I run into a buddy. He was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. His name was Green. And he had it was a double BK below the knee. Well, they called him to go down and brace and limb shops. His legs were ready. And we sit there playing cards, and they come up and got him, and he went. And he come back in a wheelchair, and his legs were laid across his arm, or his thighs. He got on the bed and put his stockings on, put that leg on, he put that leg on, tightened her up. And he gets up and he stands up and he says, "God damn, Bake, look at this." The tears were rolling right down his eyes. He says, they did what I wanted them to do. They made it 2 inches taller than what I was when I started. So I could look my girlfriend in the eye. So he lost both legs, but he still had some humor. And he was tickled to death. He got his legs and he moved around good with them. But
Tell me, Nick, about going to the Delta. What did you do when you guys were patrolling the Delta?
well, I was on an aircraft carrier. That's where I put my request in for Vietnam, and they told me I could go on USS Krishna. It's set right in the mouth of the Mekong Delta. But I went home and broke my leg, so I never got back to that duty. Yeah. And that really kind of teed me off big time, too. Because, I didn't want to lay in that hospital or be a burden to someone else. But,
So after Philadelphia, did you stay in Philadelphia until you were discharged?
yeah, I got discharged in December of '69. Yeah, I was there 18 months. Yeah. There was a non-union. The bone wouldn't grow back together. So then they took the bone out of here and grafted it down on it and put a steel plate in it. And 6, 7 screws. And that don't give me any problem. It didn't bother me at all.
When forgive me, you're the first person when you were talking about they made the legs 2 inches taller, and he still had a sense of humor. How were those guys? How did they ever come around to being able to laugh again?
I don't know. Evidently he was away from the war zone long enough that he got his senses back, and he thought to himself, "I'm goddamn lucky I'm alive," and that brought their humor up. He might not have missed 2 legs, but he's still alive. I'll tell you another good one. I'm going through the hospital looking for a friend of mine, and I'm in a wheelchair. I have my bathrobe on. "Hey, buddy," I said, "Well, he's on a gurney about like that. You got a cigarette?" And I went in my bathrobe and I shook him out one. He said, "Can you light it for me?" I lit it for him. "Yeah, you put it in my mouth." "Well, yeah, I put it in his mouth." And the nurse come by and she said, "You know you're not supposed to be smoking." She pulled that sheet off. And that god darn kid, he was sewed up right across, just below his belly button. Looked like a bottom of the end of a pillow. Can you imagine? No arms, and sewed up like that. What the hell would be the sense of even living, The thoughts like that, that's been 50 some years ago, and I still can't get it out of my mind, things like that. I don't know, because I was younger and it had a tendency to keep that in my mind, but I forget stuff all the time because, like I was telling Greg Clark earlier, I try to forget stuff, but I forget stuff that I don't want to forget. You know? You got any more questions, John?
Oh, I do. Yeah. What happened to your brother in the motorcycle?
He was drunk too.
But you couldn't find him.
He was 3 years younger. Oh no, he did come to the hospital, and he didn't even tell me. My mother told me. She says Tom was going up because the guy picked me up. Maybe Tom was passed out or something, but there's no way I could get down in that brush. My mother said Tom was running up and down trying to find you. He went about nuts. He didn't know where you was at. And my mother said, I called the hospital, and sure enough, that's where you were. Little small community. Port Allegheny Hospital. But, yeah, he's passed. He passed young. And my dad died, 7, 8 years after I got out of the service. He died young, 56, with cancer. Then my brother died at 46 of cancer. My mother, she left me a couple of years ago. She was 93. So she always says, you got my genes, keep it up. I said, I'm going to give them back to you if they fit you.
All right. You were in Philadelphia. You saw all the young kids coming through. I deal with this all the time, and I feel 100% the corpsmen, the Army medics. You know, we hear about the Marines, we hear about the Army war fighters and what we saw, what we did. I think the corpsmen, the medics, had it worse because they had to fix what we did and such. Having been in Philadelphia, recognizing that you say that was probably worse than being in Vietnam, what are your feelings on the war after all this time and seeing all the young men and women mangled?
That's a goddamn good question, Steve. I'm trying to bring myself, I tell people I don't regret it, and sometimes I don't. Then I get thinking about things I do. I don't regret doing what they asked me to do and serving my country. But the only bad feelings I got is the leadership. I don't think the leadership should have started it and sent us over there. That's what I'm thinking there. But you do what you have to do, what you're told to do, or you'd been in jail or had a bit, in the blacklist the rest of your life if you.
You're not alone in that sentiment.
Yeah.
When you came back to this, now, did you come back to this area?
Yeah, from Philadelphia to Port Allegheny. That's where I met my wife.
What was the mindset of our communities at that point about Vietnam?
I was thinking of that on the way down, and there was nothing. I didn't get, like people say they got spit on, they got this, and I didn't. I went down, had a beer with my dad at the Butler Hotel, and I don't know. No one didn't come up and shake my hand or hug me or nothing, or didn't even say thanks. I never got a thank you for 20 years later or better, but it's one of the things you're glad it did come. That people recognize you and. Yeah.
Did you get to use the GI Bill?
Pardon me?
Did you use the GI Bill?
I went to Weldon School out in Cleveland, Ohio, but it was only like a 3 or 4 week course. And they paid for that. But they didn't furnish any books or anything like that or any room and board. We rented off an older woman out there at the time. And but that got me on my way. I got my mindset, and I started welding. I welded all my life. So, but I wanted to say one more thing. Mm-hmm. If my wife watches this, and I'm sure she will, it ended up with a. Let's see. That was my part of the story that I said, and there's really no end to it. Is what the title of it. and it haunts me for 53 years later. And I endured it in my military time, and I feel grateful for serving my country. And I ended up with a loving and caring wife, 2 children, and 5 grandchildren. So that's kind of the way I wanted to end it. And P.S., I guess what I'm saying is a person doesn't have to be in a full combat zone to feel the stress and for the rest of your life, basically, you know. So